Welcome to the Cheating Secrets channel. We hope you enjoy today's story. Darling, I'm home. Thank God, it's Friday. This was my usual call when I entered the house at the end of the week. I'm in the bedroom. It was an unusual response. I went up to her bedroom and saw that she was finishing the last touch of her makeup. She wore the boldest makeup in the world. She was stunning. I'm going out tonight. I have a date with Jason Herbert. Don't wait up, I'll be back only tomorrow, she said as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Alright, have a nice date, I said almost cheerfully, going downstairs. I briefly saw her astonished reflection in the mirror. I went to the fridge to grab a beer, and in the blink of an eye, she was gone, without even saying goodbye. Youc, for me, it was no surprise. Everything went exactly as I had expected. My wife is a creature of habit. She more or less always does the same thing, reacts the same way to certain events. So, her strange behavior over the past 3 weeks set off alarms in my head. One evening, 2 days before the date, I waited for her to fall asleep and, after some arguing, finally managed to find her phone's password and the answers to my questions. She had been planning this date with her jerk colleague for over 2 weeks. They planned to have dinner at Theodorakis, her favorite Greek restaurant. She praised their avgalamono, lemon soup, to the jerk. Then they were going to dance and end the night in a hotel, where she would present her ass to him. I loved taking my wife to Theodorakis. But she didn't know it was also my favorite spot, where I dined and entertained my clients with wine. And she couldn't have known that over the years, Theo had become a good friend of mine. It took me several hours to come up with a good plan. In the morning, I called Theo and explained my situation. He was shocked by my wife's blatant disrespect, but couldn't stop laughing at my plan. That evening, just minutes after my wife left, I drove to Theodorakis and sneaked in through the service entrance with my secret ingredients to help Theo prepare an unforgettable dinner for my wife and the jerk. As expected, my wife ordered Theo's famous avgalamono. She kept praising her favorite dish, savoring every bite. I was glad she didn't notice my special spices. About half an hour after she finished her soup, she excused herself and went to the restroom. Herbert waited. And waited. And waited. She returned, full of apologies, then went back to the restroom, running like mad. And Herbert was left waiting again. Initially, Theo was skeptical that my plan to tamper with my wife's dish would actually work. But after she spent half an hour in the restroom, he had to admit that the proof was in the soup. A few grams of magnesium citrate blended perfectly with the lemon soup and would cause explosive diarrhea within 30 to 60 minutes. I also added a bit of polyethylene glycol and some senna to prolong her pleasure. It would be the perfect night for them to play. I went home, packed most of my clothes and some items in the car, and returned to wait for her comeback. She arrived at 2 a.m. and ran to the toilet. I was sitting in the living room when she came out 20 minutes later. So, how was your evening? I hope you managed to let off some steam? I smirked. Are you laughing at me? She screamed. Wow, just wow. Oh sorry, so, how long has something been working? Laughter again. I know you're angry, Eric. Let me just explain. Go on, spill it all. I laughed at my own jokes. She did not. Oh, by the way, here are the divorce papers. You treated our marriage like crap, so why not flush it down the drain like everything else? What the hell, Eric, I don't want a divorce. Oh, damn, I need to go again. Stop talking nonsense, Helen, laughs, we're done here. I stood up and headed for the front door. I can't stay here, it stinks. Don't forget to turn on the fan when you're done. Story 2. It was several years ago when my wife, Marcia, received her first batch of Bet's beer shampoo. I didn't understand what all the fuss was about when she opened the package, but she was happy, and so was I. 6 brown containers of shampoo, each looking exactly like long-neck beer bottles. Since then, every 6 weeks she would receive another batch. Marcia and I had been married for 22 years. We didn't have any children. We lived in comfort and affluence. I was a marketing manager at a small company that manufactured industrial drainage pumps. Marcia didn't work and never wanted to. We had no problems, either financially or personally. Then I messed it all up by being curious. I took Marcia's Kia to get the oil changed. I accidentally noticed that she had 2 house keys on her keychain. I know it's not unusual, but since I only had 1 key, I couldn't help but wonder why she needed the second key. It really bothered me, so on my way home, I stopped and made a copy. I probably could have just asked her, but for some reason, I didn't. For the next 2 months, I walked around with this strange key in my pocket. The first Tuesday of every month was poker night. This month it was at Parker's apartment. Jeff Parker was the HR manager at our company. We had known each other for over 10 years. Parker was the only player in our group of 6 who wasn't married. The other 4 players were also company employees. We had been playing together for years. The host usually provided snacks. The only difference this time was the chili pepper that Benny Sisk insisted each of us try. It was his wife's favorite recipe. Unfortunately, about an hour later, it hit all of us hard, and the bathroom became very crowded. Instead of waiting for a spot to free up, I dove into Parker's bedroom and used the master bathroom. I finished with the toilet paper and opened the vanity to grab a spare roll. That's when everything went south. On the second shelf, prominently displayed, was a bottle of Bet's beer shampoo. Next to the bottle was a collection of women's cosmetics that looked all too familiar. Soon after, the game broke up. The chili had gotten to all of us. Leaving, I discreetly made sure that the spare key Marcia had fit perfectly in Jeff's front door. The next day I was useless at work. All I could think about were 5 questions. I knew the where, what and who, but not the when, and I didn't want to know the why. By 5 o'clock, I had a pretty good idea of the when. It had to be Friday. The weekly sales production meeting I led ran from 9 to 11 a.m. Jeff Parker was not at that meeting. It was a long shot, but it was the best time for Marcia and Jeff's meeting. Of course, it could also happen on weekends when she went shopping or was out for some other reason. I caught myself pondering the whole situation. I wasn't looking for absolute proof, just a degree of confirmation. I left work a bit early and headed downtown. I found what I was looking for at the Far East Market. Fortunately, the Eastern cuisine stores in our area usually have a range of Indian goods. For $10, I bought 3 jars of henna tattoo ink, guaranteed to last 7 to 10 days. Would it work? I had no idea. Actually, I was eager to try it. At home, everything was normal. At that point, I avoided any confrontation but knew it was inevitable soon. Now, I faced a new dilemma. What was I going to do after the grand reveal? Another sleepless night ensued as I weighed all my options and yearned for sleep that came slowly. On Thursday morning, I did something I never thought I would. I called a headhunter. I had never really used their services before, but now everything had changed. The guy I chose was the one I felt most comfortable with. We updated my resume over the phone, and I narrowed it down to either Charlotte or Huntsville. I told him to call me back no earlier than Friday afternoon. I didn't want him to bother me to death. That day, Jeff Parker had a charity meeting for employees. I took advantage of this to go to his house and do the dirty work. Surgical gloves were necessary. I poured all 3 cones of henna into the shampoo bottle and left with a broad smile. After dinner, I spent the remainder of the evening on the computer. Things that previously didn't concern me suddenly became important. When I went to bed, it was already very late. The next morning, I noticed Jeff leaving the building as I started my weekly meeting. The day promised to be interesting. At noon, I wandered into the HR department to see if Jeff was available for lunch. I feigned the greatest surprise when his secretary informed me that Jeff had urgent family matters and would be in Baltimore all the next week. On my way back to my office, I wondered if my wife would make a similar call to me or if she would be waiting for me at home. For lunch, I had a bento box of sushi. My headhunter arranged 3 potential interviews for me, 2 in Charlotte and 1 in Huntsville. I told him to schedule the Alabama interview for Monday and informed my boss that I would take the day off. I spent the rest of the day getting my finances in order and killing time. When I returned home, Marcia was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in her hands, wearing old sweatpants. Her light hair was partially dyed with dark red henna, which also ran down her face and neck. She had let her hair air dry and hadn't combed it. It turned out she had tried to wash the dye off her face, but it hadn't worked. The parts of her skin that weren't stained were marked with red spots from vigorous rubbing. I got the impression she wanted to say something, but nothing came out of her lips. She didn't notice how I smiled as I turned and walked out the door. I plan to have a nice ribeye for dinner. I think I'll like Huntsville. Thank you for being with us and listening until the end. If you found it interesting, please subscribe, give us a like, and leave your comments. And we'll see you on the Cheating Secrets channel.